I want to touch on we'll touch on the SEC big picture in a moment, but look, I know the Georgia fans get pissy with us because they say all Georgia does is win and you guys bash them, but there's no one that could watch the first half of
Hmm.
yesterday's game and Carson Beck and tell me that that Georgia team is dangerous. They let a Florida team hang around with a third string quarterback and a two-star kid that came from the Ivy League that never really played, hang around with them pretty much the entire game until Georgia does what they do and they pulled away late. You can't convince me right now. This could change in 2 weeks, but Paul, that was not good.
No, Tim Tebow told me on Friday Carson Beck's still having a great year, and it's really the fault of his receivers. And I watched that yesterday, and I watched him overthrow a lot of receivers, as you did, Matt. And I mean, Georgia could easily lose Saturday to Ole Miss. Wouldn't he really be considered that shocking? And then can they get it back against Tennessee? I mean, that's just where we are right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side of that game yesterday, I mean, Billy Napier just will not go away. Although I think he's close to now going away because the numbers game for him is insurmountable. That was a game he had to win, and obviously he didn't. And he's got to find a win somewhere against either Texas, LSU, or Ole Miss.
I'm going to take that the other way, Paul. I think Billy Napier has done enough to stay. I think Billy Napier should get another year. Here's why. You look at that team yesterday, so many players out, their best players out, and they took Georgia 2020. I believe that was when they scored that touchdown to tie. I believe that it was already in the fourth quarter,
Yeah, no, it was time.
2020. And so here's the argument. And those who watch the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate or anything that we do enough, you know my thoughts on a coaching departure. You would better make sure who you're getting is better. Part one. Part two, you would better make sure that the guy that comes in is not going to set the program back before he takes it forward. Will you grant me that Florida's playing hard for Billy Napier? I don't like at this point. Who are you going to get? Like, who's coming
Oh,
in?
no, I hear you. And listen, I think it's easier to make a compelling argument for him based on what almost happened this year. But spending the weekend with a lot of Florida fans, I'm just going to give you what my impressions from talking to them.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, they're ready to move on. And really, the only thing that's keeping them with Billy Napier is Lagway. And now that Lagway is done, probably for the season.
that's interesting. Yeah,
And I don't know if there's a guarantee that he comes back. And I know that that's kind of baked into the cake. But I'm not positive of that. So I mean it is I mean it may be a split decision which favors Billy Napier because the only way I would agree with you to fire him is if you have somebody that is lock solid because you can get away with it. I mean he's done enough this year to show that he's capable. The problem that he ended up with, we all focused on those ending games, the stretch he's in right now.
sure.
FSU exited out. We didn't factor that Texas A&M early on and Miami were on the same level. So I mean, his schedule has just been. I mean, you put Clemson on with the same schedule, or somebody else, even in the SEC.
Yeah,
You put Georgia with the same schedule, and they're going to have problems. It's that challenging right now for him. But it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I'm not advocating that he gets fired. I'm just simply saying, based on what I heard down
sure.
there, he may be out of time.
Well, look, and now with Lagway, it's like okay, they'll get someone because it's still got Florida talent. And granted, they're trying to develop it. I think he made some wrong decisions and players who he let leave that were there from the prior regime. I mean, I can name five pass rushers in the ACC right now that came from Florida
Right.
that they probably would have liked to have. But now with the quarterback situation, they're done. And then
Yeah.
that's kind of the thing where they're going to look at you're going to look at the end product of the final record and I just so who's a home like who would satiate Florida Gators taste? You're telling me it's Lane Kiffin or
Again, I'm giving
bust?
you this is by the way, what I'm about to tell you may be as reliable as the presidential polls. I don't know. But I'm talking to people in the parking lot at Everbank Stadium.
Good.
So I'll say that on the front end. They want Lane Kiffin. You can. agree or disagree, America, but that's who they are fixated on, and that has not changed in 10 weeks.
So let's say, oh, this is so good. Let's say Lane, because look, segue to Ole Miss. That's how you know Paul and I have done TV together for a decade plus. We know how to segue into a segue. Let's just say, like the Ole Miss we saw yesterday against Arkansas, that's the one we're like, oh, there's Ole Miss. Let's just say, Paul, that hangs around because we know they play good defense. They didn't have everybody in that game. Let's just say that Ole Miss shows up against Georgia in Oxford on Saturday. And then what? If Ole Miss ends up 10-2, they're in.
And by the way, that if that Ole Miss team travels back home, they do win the game against Georgia. And I don't think you can leave if you're in the CFP, unless
There you
Florida
go.
says, you know what, we're going to announce after the Florida State game he's leaving, and I mean, by waiting that if they don't have a coach within a week, it's pretty obvious it's somebody in the CFP. I don't think you can pull that off in today's world without just blowing your program up. But there's no way Lane Kiffin is leaving Ole Miss while his team is in the playoffs.
And that okay, so I've had this discussion with a couple of ADs. I've had this discussion with the guy that I sit next to on Saturdays in the booth on Thursdays. Look at what college football has done to itself in the good 12-team playoff, more teams in. Penn State losing yesterday doesn't matter because they're in the college football playoff if they go 11-1 based on their schedule. Same with Indiana if they're only lost to Ohio State. Okay, there's the good of it. Here's the bad of it. Programs, ADs, and everyone has now put themselves in a hijack situation where if you want to get rid of your coach in your program like Florida, who we both agree needs to be among the top 10 in the program annually, you're screwed. Because if you want to get someone that you believe can elevate them to the Steve Spurrier, Urban Meyer era, you either have to gamble and wait past the recruiting period or get someone that's not in the college football playoff with how good is that going to do you anyway?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing you can do is completely lie and keep your coach and then fire him in January. You're still going to pay the same price though. Because whatever you get on signing day, you can lose the next day when you get rid of your coach. So it's a Hobson's choice. I don't know what Florida's going to do because the narrative on Florida is already baked in that they have an interim president who happened to be the president, the full-time president who
Right.
hired all these people. So I don't think that's really fair. It's just really the will of the people, and I don't know, Matt. There's almost the last time I heard from the Florida athletic director was exactly 10 weeks ago when he told me he was all in on Billy Napier. So he hasn't said another word since.